Hi guys, it's my pleasure to welcome you to Scientists Live at Carnegie Museum of Natural History. And today we're in one of the bug rooms. We're going to have an exciting adventure talking about what is near and dear to my heart for, how many years that I've been here. There's a question for you. And we'll see what we see in terms of talking about bugs in their extremes. The fastest ones, the biggest ones, the smallest ones, and just to give you an idea why insects are so amazing. I'm John Rawlins, and I'm the curator in charge of the collections here. I have a staff that helps me and all the time to take care of Carnegie Museum's bugs. You might wonder why there are so many different kinds of bugs, and you might wonder why we would want to study bugs. I mean, I didn't really want to study bugs when I first went to a doctoral program at Cornell University in New York, but I came out studying bugs because I met people that were very influential and who talked to me about what would the future be without bugs and why bugs are so important to study. And I might share with you guys why bugs are so important. And it's really very easy. The biggest reason of all is that there are so many individual insects, bugs, out there in our world that it's hard to imagine. This is the individual bugs. Even one ant colony might have thousands to tens of thousands of individual bugs. And if you start to count all the little grubs and all the little crawlers and creepies and whatever that you see in your backyard and everywhere you go on the planet, you begin to realize that that's why bugs are so important. They're everywhere we are. They're part of us, so very clearly we need to take care of them. Another thing that's important, that is a reason there's so many bug studies done, is the fact that there are so many species of bugs. Species are basically different kinds of organisms, and in bugs it's really most of the living species diversity on Earth is from the world of bugs. And it's very important. But the third reason the bugs are important, there's going to be 4 reasons, guys, so don't hold your breath. The third reason is that all the terrible bad things that bugs do. Bugs carry disease, they eat our favorite trees, they compete with cockroaches, and cockroaches are bugs. And so they end up being pests, they end up being agroforestry problem animals, things like borers and things that get in fruits that ruin them and so forth. And we all know these bugs, and we all realize that they cost not only time and effort for all the damage they do, but they also are very important medically. Many of the world's most horrific diseases are transmitted by bugs. Well, I don't want to tell you a story that's all dreepy like that. I want to tell you a story that goes to the 4th major reason you study bugs, and that's all the good things the bugs do. Bugs are beautiful. Can you imagine looking at a gorgeous butterfly and thinking bad thoughts? Can't be done. The bugs themselves have interesting biology, interesting ways that they do their behavior in all of their stages. They're so unstudied that very often somebody, just a regular person, not a scientist or anything like that, can easily make new observations and contribute to the science of bugs, which, as you guys all know, is entomology. Entomology, that's the science of studying bugs. Well, to demonstrate this, so many individuals, so many species, so many bad things, and so many good things, I want to take you for this particular talk down the trail of the Guinness Book of World Records, which is the place, of course, where people apply and get approved to if they have done something in some way that exceeds all known prior standards. In other words, somebody is the fastest, somebody is the biggest, and so forth. And that's what I want to do for a little bit here today. And I brought with me some of these bugs. A good example of this one, let me just show you this one here. Can you see that one? It's a little tiny white moth. And all of those specimens in that tray right there were collected in Pittsburgh of all places. And what that is a Paradoxus yucca moth. It's very active and necessary to pollinate the yuccas that people have, mostly decorative, but there is a species that is more widespread that provides food for these yucca moths. The thing that's interesting about this yucca moth in the terms of world records is it has been known to undergo a resting phase where it never moves, it never breathes, it never winks an eye, nothing happens, it's just immobile. We call it arrested development, waiting for better times, and that arrested development is called diapause. There's a big word for you, diapause. The longest diapause known is in one of these yucca moths, and it's 19 years. So the development of this thing was held off for 19 years. We know one that has 17 years because we know the cicada, the periodical cicada, 17-year locust, some people call it, and you can see it right here in this tray. We also have bugs that are showy and do unexpected things, like this bug right here is a click beetle, and it's interesting because it has the world record bug brightness factor. Now that brightness is measured in millilamberts. That's the units, like instead of inches or feet or whatever, it's millilamberts. And this guy has 45 millilamberts. It's New World tropical. And it's like a gigantic version of a firefly. A firefly is really pathetic though compared to these pyrophorus. The scientific name pyrophorus tells you a hint about how it's a carrier of fire. And that's the brightest bug that we know. The fastest bug? Well, the fastest bug running on the ground is supposedly a tiger beetle from Australia, Cicindula hudsoni. And you'll notice that I use a lot of Latin language and everything because we don't have a choice. We don't have a common name. We don't have a regular name for most bugs. We just have to do with our Latin. And I know you guys will be a sum to that. You'll be adopting those Latin names and using them regularly too, no big deal. This particular one that I have in this tray right here is a North American tiger beetle that's also extremely fast. And in fact, one of our staff argues that this is probably faster than the one that's in the Book of Records. The one from Australia is a little more slender than this megacephala. What about something like the longest-lived bug? The longest-lived bug, as far as we know, for a single individual is 51 years. And it's done by this species here, a metallic wood-boring beetle. This is really gorgeous. Look at this. Can you see that one? This lasts the stages of the larval stages and whatever, from egg through to the final development of the adult, is 51 years, which is remarkable. And it makes our 17-year locusts look pretty sad, doesn't it? Because it takes them 17 years to get to where they're going. Well, everybody's been wondering if you had fastest. What about flyers? Well, there's several things involved in insect flight. One of the things that's involved is how much movement you make over the ground, called ground speed, when you're flying in the air above the ground. And the record holder of that is a common cutworm. And in fact, I have lots and lots of the black cutworm, which holds the official record, but not for 1 minute do I, as a scientist, believe that that's the only one, because in that same group, flying all around the world, are hundreds of species and dozens of genera. In other words, tons and tons of other ones that have never been checked by a scientist. So when we say that the fastest ground speed is, something like in units and kilometers per hour, like something like 113 kilometers per hour, that's pretty fast. It means that they're probably flying in the incoming swarms that move around at high elevation after or before, the hurricanes strike. a meteorological climate change that will bring about movement of large air masses also moves tons and tons of these bugs flying at high speed. There's another bug that this particular one I brought with me were some that I collected in the Dominican Republic a few years ago. And this is one called Malafida. And I'm putting my money on Malafida against the black cutworm any day. Okay, you guys have all the hints you need. Now here's the bug, another little bug that I collected. It says my name's on the label in 1990 in Cuba. And this bug is one that flies extremely fast, and it's related to one that holds the record for the longest flight. That's 4,500 kilometers in distance. You guys can convert that to miles, but it means that this thing came out of the Middle East and flew across Africa, across the Atlantic Ocean, and landed 4,500 kilometers later in the New World. That's how the record was measured. But again, I don't believe for a minute that the record that stands is the only one true record, because the problem is there are so many bugs that how can you check them all to know which one's fastest and which one's slowest? It's like this species, an African cicada. And that if you look close, I think you can probably see this individual here is prepared on its back. This is the loudest insect. This insect can scream when it's doing its mating call, and you can see it when it's mounted upside down. You can see the little sound device, the little thing that produces the sound. The record is 106 decibels, and that's like, I don't know what, like a jet airplane flying overhead only 100 feet up, or maybe the high decibels of a hard rock band, which would be in the order of 110 decibels. This is not a rocker. This is a guy who's out there looking for love in all the right places, and if he screams loud enough, then he'll find out what all that is about. Now, we want to talk about big bugs, and that's the interesting one. I'm going to come back on that at the end, but we also want to talk about bugs that are really dangerous or toxic. And perhaps the deadliest bug, drop for drop, pound for pound, is in the record books, is a species of harvester ant found in California, Pogonomyrmex maricopa, and other species of western United States Pogonomyrmex. These things have amazing venom, amazing powerful venom with LDs down in the tiny units of milligrams and less, and can be, if injected, can be truly deadly. I didn't bring any Pogonomyrmex with me today because you guys will maybe know those. Those are those harvester ants out west that you always see, so-called red ants, but not really a red ant. But here's one that nobody knows about, and I just put it in for fun here because this is a fun adventure we're doing. We're looking at the really poisonous bugs, and see this moth here? This moth is from Central and South America. It's a genus Lonomia, L-O-N-O-M-I-A. And this could easily be, in its larval form especially, when it has a caterpillar, the caterpillar that produces this moth is a little prickly one. It's one that can sting you if it touches its spines on you. And it is still, it's been studied now better than it was 10 years ago, but it is a deadly one because it causes a delayed homogenization, that's like turning it to just muck, of the nervous system over a period of 10 to 12 days. When you get stung by most poisonous animals, or bitten, or anything that's in venomation, you often have a situation where you have to wait about 20 seconds before it really hits you. With this bug, you actually think that you might have been hit, but then you notice nothing happens. And a week goes by, and still nothing happens. And then when it happens, it's already far too late to do something. Nobody's tested this in terms of drop for drop kind of strength test, but there it is, an unusual one. Sometimes we have things that in the record books that are very discreet, and one of them that's very discreet is if you have a female insect and you hold it in confinement, it will eventually, in many cases, lay its eggs. And when it lays its eggs, you have a chance to make a world record. And it's going to be pretty hard workout, because one of the records for eggs laid is a species of Duraline ant. And this is a big ant, and that queen ant who's going to lay all those eggs lays 3 to 4 million eggs in a 25-day life cycle period. So we're not looking at 100 eggs or 500 or whatever. We're looking at a lot. And even closer to home, this is Australia, but closer to home in terms of the represented group, is this ghost moth right here. This is a species of Tritina from Australia. All of these specimens, by the way, are taken from the Carnegie collection to show you guys today. And when they get a little bit lonely, they'll have to go back to the darkness of the Carnegie collection to where they'll be waiting for the next episode. But this Tritina is pretty interesting because it has a formal count of just under 45,000 eggs laid from a single female. That's a lot of eggs. Finally, we'll talk big. And big means that you're wondering what these guys are. And basically, these guys they're not clear winners. Nobody knows which one is the biggest, because here's what's weird. There's a big debate about what big means. When one of your friends says to you, "You have the biggest muscles I've ever seen," what do they mean? Do they mean the weight of your muscles, if you were to weigh them? Or do they mean the length of your muscles? Or how big around they are? Or some other measurement? And nobody can make up their mind what is the biggest insect. Is it the heaviest insect? The heaviest insect probably goes to somebody that's not even here, a New Zealand weta. You get a W-E-T-A. This is a strange relative of the katydids, lives only in New Zealand, and is about 71 grams. It's supposed to be one of the heaviest bugs. But if you looked at one, it wouldn't appear as anywhere near as big as this one. This is a longhorn beetle, Titanus giganteus. You can tell from that name, Titanus giganteus, that something is really, really big. Truth is, which one do we put our money on? Well, I think this is potentially probably the meanest if it were measured as a bite. But big, just plain big, is probably going to be one of these two scarabs. They both fly, and one is from the New World, this one the Megasoma, and there's a Goliath beetle. And the Goliath beetle looks a little smaller, but its density is a little higher. And so I couldn't find a number. Everybody agreed that these 3 bugs plus the weta would be the biggest insect, but what's big mean? Because many of you have already seen this huge thing over here. In fact, there are 3 huge ones over here. So who gets the record? It can't be decided. There's need for serious, listen to me carefully, serious scientific inquiry is really needed to determine the biggest insect of all. Who knows, maybe one of these days we'll get all of us together and take the bugs we have and weigh them. Then we'd have a scientific measurement that could be compared to be big or small or large or you name it. And oh, what about small? Well, we now have a debate, and when it's small, it's just a linear measure as a Dicopomorpha species, and it's only about 140 microns long. Now a millimeter is a thousandth of a meter, and a micron is even smaller by a factor of 1,000, so it's really tiny. So anyhow, let's move over to this drawer again, and I want to talk in a little detail before we go about these moths. And this time we're going to make it a measurement that they're going to get the record for that can be tested. It's the four-wing span. How wide from tip to tip of the wing are these species? This one is the winner, everybody says. Everybody, if you look it up in Russian universities, if you look it up in South African textbooks, if you look it up in European treatises, it's always the same answer: the white witch. The white witch comes out of dry portions, dry habitats in South America, but it flies great distances, and it migrates in one way. It's a mission without a goal, because it ends up in places like Colorado Springs or up and down the front ranges of the Rockies in North America. And that's where sometimes the specimens are very confusing, because you say, I had no idea this lived in Colorado. Look at that thing. And the truth of it is that most of that is just flying away at the end of the season. So now we got a problem, because of course this is, if you measure the longest wing, then you have a wing that's even bigger. Here, see that? That's the famous Atlas moth. And that's a big one. And that's a female. So the females are always, in most moth species, bigger than the males. And that one is special to me, guys, because that's the one that I caught in Taiwan years ago. It was my first Atlas moth ever, alive, at a porch light, big porch light set up in front of a big two-story building. And it was like something out of a dream, with this big old Atlas moth going. It was so real that it was scary. I mean, it was like I didn't want to grab it or do anything with it. And that is the exact specimen. It was brought back to the Carnegie Museum and prepared, labeled. You can read on there exactly who was involved with collecting it and all of that stuff, which helps us so much in the study of insects. If we did not have big museum collections and the like, we would never be able to understand those four very real reasons why one would wish to study insects. Because there's so many individuals, because there are so many species, so many bad things, and so many good things. So many good things. Often the good things are the ways that they operate in biological control to control the bad things. So kind of like a whole world of their own, and they kind of wonder who we are running around with our stuff. Well, there's one last final kink. In looking at our sizable collection here of the white witch, we stumbled onto a publication that was published more than a century ago by a man in England, in which he scientifically described and named another species of black witch. Now when you go to the internet, or you go to your textbooks, or you go to your teacher to ask what is the biggest, you can't just say white witch, because that's Thyssania agrippina. Your guys' Latin is great. I've never had a group so involved and so directly responsible for correct pronunciation of scientific names. You know what it could be? It could also be Thyssania pomponia. One of my heroes was the guy who described it. I never lived in the time when he was, but his name was Carl Jordan. And he was an amazing entomologist, using insects almost entirely for his scientific studies. So here we have in this tray two white witches. The difference in size is due to the sexual difference. Moms are bigger, heavier, and bigger in the sense of longer parts and wider wings and whatever than males. The lower one down is a male. But now the question comes, which is which? Where is Pomponia? What does it look like? And when you go to the web, you can't find that answer. You can find Pomponia in technical websites that list, all the species and things. But now we have a job. We need to determine which of the white witches, we got that? Which of the white witches are the biggest? And right now we know from numbers at the Carnegie Museum what the answer is, but who knows? We need to do more research before we release our final result. Okay? Here are some questions that you guys have been sending in while we've been on air. Did a bug ever sting you? If so, what kind? Yeah, I've had some bugs sting me many times, and many bugs. And of course, some of the worst ones by far are the members of the wasps and bees, the Hymenoptera. But I think the worst one, sting that I ever got was from a mutilid wasp, a velvet ant. And there the females have no wings, but they're given the nickname cow killers. It's not real because they can't kill a cow by stinging it, but it's so excruciating pain. And I don't believe that the Guinness Record books has a most painful category, but they should, shouldn't they, from that question. What is the scariest bug? I don't know. I think if you look at this bug thing, this beast here closely, it's probably the scariest. Look at this mouth. I have to show you this. Look at this mouth. That mouth is like a bolt cutter. When you press that mouth up against something that it can bite, it snaps it, it breaks it. You wouldn't want to have your pinky, your little finger in the way. Seriously though, if you talk about the scariest bug, I would say what you're really asking is, what is the bug that could do all of us the most damage? And we know, we're very informed people, so we're watching the TV and learning and going to school and learning about the bad things that bugs do. And to me, the scariest bug, even if it's a beautiful bug like this bug here, this could be a very scary bug, because even though it's a beautiful orange moth, because of the problem with its toxicity. And so to me, when you have a virus like Ebola, or you have a huge killer of people is malaria, these are all insect vector diseases, but it goes on and on and on. The list of, they fill whole books with all the different kinds of diseases that have been studied that are lethal to human beings. Those are scary bugs. So I don't know, we're going to have to give a prize for scariest bug. We're going to have to give it to some mosquito. Sorry, mosquitoes, I know you're good fish bait, but we're going to have to make you scariest. What can you tell us about Luna moths? Well, one thing I can tell you about Luna moths is that they are unbelievably beautiful. I can also tell you that they are very closely related to another brown moth that doesn't look even vaguely like them, called the Polyphemus. If you have a caterpillar of a Polyphemus and a caterpillar of a Luna moth, you can hardly tell them apart. It's very difficult to know which one is which. And Luna moths are interesting because in Asia, China and Southeast Asia, there are many species of Luna moths, not the one we have. We have just one this far north. There's a lot of debate, though, about whether the Luna moths from the Gulf Coast, Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, may not represent some additional species or additional population. I'll get in trouble now for that. I'll have 2,000 Luna moth lovers writing to say, what do you mean 2 species? Yes, please do. Why do fireflies light up? Well, fireflies primarily light up as mating signals. So they're sending signals between the sexes to be able to orient in the darkness so that mom can find dad. And that's what it's all about. Okay, was that all? Okay. Well, I have a question for you guys, if I've got a minute or two. I want to know how many of you need to study insects. I want to know how many of you need to study insects. Is there a chance that there's anybody out there that would be an entomologist when they grew up? If so, you need to pay close attention to all the different insect species, not just a few. You have to be very careful to apply to insects rigorous scientific methods that will allow me, an experienced professional, to take your observations and use them with great confidence and pride. And so I think you guys can do that, can't you? Well, if not for the regular guys, for the old guys, okay? Thank you for your attention.